We hope you feel nervous listening to this podcast of GP Rejects Teammate Collision.
If you're Sergio Perez, you should.
Don't touch each other, please. They go right down deep, and they have collided. So both the BWT cars collide.
So it's an inside squabble between the two Williams. Looks like that Rosberg tapped the back of Webber. That is absolutely the last thing any Formula One team wants to see.
That's a Lacey and Heidfeld. I don't know what's happened, but it's the poor Alain Prost, as if he hadn't got enough pressure on him.
Oh, we've lost a wheel. It's a racing engineering car that's ripped his left wheel off. Furious at his teammate. That will be a very fun team briefing.
Hello there. Welcome to the Grand Prix Rejects podcast, Teammate Collision. My name is Jeremy, and I'm here with my partner, Lennart.
As always, it's a pleasure to be here.
And we are going to talk on our episode number 1, I think. We are going to be talking about the reject of the mid-season. We are recording this on the 21st of August 2021. It is currently the summer break during the F1 season, and we're going to tell you what we think of the season so far, including our best drives, our best drivers, our worst drives, our worst drivers, the biggest upsets, the biggest surprises of the season, and just generally what we think of how it's gone so far. So, Lennart, do you want to start us off? What do you think of the season so far?
Well, so far, it's been a season of ups and downs. In a way, it is much better than it has been before, and in a way, it has been not quite as good as years prior. One thing I am, of course, very happy about is that we have an actual championship battle worthy of the name, which is something we've been quite missing for the last few years. But on the other hand, some of the races were not quite as up to par with previous years. If you have to ask me whether I think this season is better than 2019 and 2020, I'm going to say obviously yes, because, well, again, championship battle. But if I compare to, say, 2018, I would give that year's, as of now, the edge.
Tell us what you really think. Don't be so non-committal. I know you.
Well, yeah, it's as simple as that. It's been a season with a fun championship battle, but a lot of the stuff happening around it is just not that interesting. We had a few dull races, really, and 7 out of 10, as the cliche goes.
No, I was expecting even more criticism from you, actually. I think all season you have been, especially after Bahrain, I remember there was the fight between Verstappen and Hamilton for the win, and you were telling everyone, oh, no, this is going to be another Hamilton walkover. And it hasn't been. It has been pretty damn even, and I would say it's been more in Verstappen's favour, but with the last 2 races, obviously, with the collective however many 4 points he's got from the last 2 races, it's now gone back in Hamilton's favour, but I think even if Hamilton wins this year, I would say this is the most engaged I've been since Rosberg was driving. I found especially that after Rosberg retired, we had a long era of Formula One where Bottas was hired to be Hamilton's teammate, but I think everyone knew that with Rosberg gone, no one was going to be put in that seat who would actually challenge Hamilton, or even if they were good enough, would be allowed to challenge Hamilton. And I felt like the last 3 or so seasons up until this one have been something of a Hamilton walkover. That's kind of because it's been fabricated that way, and I feel like I've not been all that engaged knowing that Hamilton in the best car and the best team, he's a very good driver, have just been sweeping every title. And so although I wouldn't say Red Bull are exactly the protagonists of the season given the drama that we had after Silverstone, I would still say that it's very engaging to have anyone fight Mercedes and bring us a real championship title, at least at this point of the season. The last time we had this kind of championship challenge was Sebastian Vettel, who by this time in 2018 had already thrown it in the wall in Hockenheim, and I think most people nowadays kind of look back on that as the moment Vettel's season fell apart and in some extent, his Ferrari career. So let's hope that Silverstone and Hungary weren't that for Verstappen, I guess. I hope we don't look back on Silverstone when he got clipped into the wall at Cops as being the moment when it all went wrong. I hope it continues this way, because I think this season has been absolutely great.
Of course, it was clear that my earlier predictions of a Hamilton walkover would come back to haunt me, but who am I to deny you the pleasure of serving me that steamy, fresh, delicious humble pie?
You invite this upon yourself.
Of course, that is the inherent nature of a hot take merchant. Stuff blows up in their face, and in the end, I personally am of the opinion that someone who is confident and throwing his feelings out there, his beliefs, his observations, whatever, they should be able to handle it if the stuff blows up in their face. But of course, you are right in that we shouldn't completely mock them, especially if it's an opinion that wasn't even that unique at the time. The fear of the Hamilton walkover was pretty much just me being cynical after the last few years, but generally speaking, yeah. God damn it, I want to slam my fist on the table sometimes.
No.
Don't we all?
Opinions are all welcome. The world would be so boring if we didn't have... If we couldn't make ridiculous assumptions about what's going to happen. The number of terrible hot takes I've had. Well, not even hot takes. They were my predictions for the season that Button would walk over 2012 and that Rosberg would walk over Hamilton as a teammate, and all these terrible predictions that I had. So
on that note, I had my own. After that, I was convinced after 2015 whoever loses that championship battle would be a number 2 for life, and then Rosberg immediately says shut up, slaps me across the face with his world title.
So let's start with the positives and then slowly but surely get more and more cynical as we are and our black hearts are. Who would be your driver of the season?
So before we begin with that, I just want to stress I am very bright today, both from a spirit point and from the area surrounding me, or basically by myself, because I am in the summer break mood and I'm wearing a Hawaii shirt, so I am going to be cheerful all the way now.
How has your summer break been, Lennart? I have not asked you that yet. How has your summer break been?
Yeah, so far pretty good. I've had my time of work just this week. I've been out of town doing a bit of tourism in the beautiful Saxony city of Chemnitz, and among other things, I've been seeing a lot of engineering down there, such as a couple of racing cars from the 30s. It's always pretty much a humbling experience to see those cars, see the no seat belts, the basically no area to dampen impacts. It's just absolutely insane that people back then just sat in there like it was nothing. Always a very humbling insight. But I should of course ask you how your summer break has been.
No, I'm doing fine. This is going to be our first and only podcast, is my prediction, because I just got a job. So we recorded our pilot and now this episode while I'm unemployed. I just got a job a couple of weeks back, and I'm moving to France on Tuesday, the Tuesday after this podcast is recorded. So probably when it's released, I'll be there. And
all right.
So yeah, I've just been enjoying my summer in Finland, where I've lived for a few years, and I'm just soaking up the thunderstorms here. And seeing friends and family, that kind of thing. Just trying my best to just get a job, and now that I've got one, I can finally move on with my life. And
I get that. The summer has been pretty wet actually all across Europe, really, it seems like.
Ricardo, and going off at the back, it's Yuki Tsunoda. Tsunoda, who's made up 10 places in this race, is now going to see all that good work come to an end in the space of 600 metres down to the first corner at the restart.
Okay, let's begin. Who would be your driver of the season, Lennart?
Well, the answer to that is pretty simple. It's going to be Lando Norris, who, well, I have to say it, he is currently the best driver in the world. Period. Not just best in F1, but best in the world, really. He's barely put a foot wrong. Like, if you have to force me to count it, it'd be like 2 times, 3 times. I think 2 times it is. And even his quote-unquote worst race in Spain wasn't even like McLaren's best, so where he's like, oh, there's a great opportunity to come by. He was just as average as McLaren was. So, yeah, all in all, he's been brilliant. If I had to pick one driver in the very next race to get me the best results, the answer is Lando Norris. So, yeah, he's my number one.
Yeah, no, I complete agreement. This is a very boring beginning, but yeah, complete agreement. Lando Norris is, if in terms of, you're talking about the stint of just the first 11 races this year, Lando Norris, as you say, it's not just how good he's been, but it's like the complete domination of Daniel Ricciardo, whom I think a lot of people went into this expecting to be relatively even, the way that Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc have been. Lando Norris is really, he's very, very good, and he's clearly showing that McLaren's faith in him when they put him in that seat 2 years ago is
more than justified.
It's more than justified, especially seeing as with every season McLaren are getting stronger. We could see next year, if somehow they work the regulations very well, you could see Lando Norris winning races. That's my first prediction, that next season we're going to see Lando Norris winning races, if not sooner.
Yeah, I was going to say we could. Admittedly, this year it would take something weird, something out of the ordinary. But if we have another, assuming it happens, another Turkish Grand Prix like last year, then I do not see why he couldn't even win this year.
Yeah, even another Silverstone, when you had Charles Leclerc leading for most of the race and he almost won it until the last few laps. You could easily see Lando Norris in the same situation if another first lap incident happens. So yeah, the Lando Norris driver of the year so far, by far. I'm not even sure who I would put second, because everyone else has had dud races of even one or two, and that's normal. Everyone has, it's absolutely expected for drivers to have patchy races from time to time, but Lando Norris is, well, he's been perfect.
Yeah. I could put a more clear number two. For me, that's Max, but honestly, number two, but it's a good way off Lando. Again, he's well-deserved third in the championship. I would even say, with all these things that could be said about the number twos, there's genuinely a feeling he would have been, even if Bottas and Perez had both been better. So, yeah, best in the world, period. Again, there are some people who believe that, for example, last year Will Power was obviously mentioned often as being such by the more IndyCar-aligned people. Scott McLaughlin got some love from the Australians, but right now, across the entire planet, there's nobody better than Lando Norris.
I can't speak for the entire world, but I can at least speak for Formula One. What would be your best drive of the season? I'm talking about like a race performance on a Sunday, or if you want to go broader, like a whole race weekend. What would be your one or two best picks?
Well, I'm going to start with the mainstream one. That would be Sebastian Vettel at Baku.
Yep.
Simply, while his final position was, of course, helped by the chaos that happened around him, but the reality is he was completely superior on the pace. He had everything under control. He went and attacked those ahead of him. He put himself in the position to inherit those places in the last couple of stages with the Verstappen puncture, with the Hamilton, can't even call it a lock-up break mess up. So yeah, that would be the boring mainstream answer. And as far as the unpopular one, it's not even unpopular, but
is this a hot take incoming?
Well, lukewarm could take. That would be Latifi at the Hungaroring, where he blocked everyone for like half the race in that Williams. So yeah, that would be my number two, or not even my number two, my joint best really performance of the season. So obviously from a reject standpoint, brilliant. Like that is the historical stuff we're talking about with Bernoldi holding up Coulthard for the entire race at Monaco.
Who could forget?
What are the other legendary blocking performances are there?
Well, there's truly made an entire legendary career off of blocking people.
Yeah, but
no, I think to block anyone in a Williams, never mind much faster cars, like fighting for race position, it was nothing short of brilliant from both Williams drivers. George Russell he's also been very, very good this season, and much of the press and the media have been hyping him up, and it's very nice to see him actually deliver. So anyone who knows me on the forum, or hopefully you'll get to listen to the pilot sometime, and I'll say the same thing there, that I am against the idea of recency bias, boxing judges who only judge the best thing from the last 10 seconds of the match.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to talk too much about Hungary, because Hungary was an amazing jump into the mid-season.
I get that.
Yeah, I will mention Alonso and Ocon, though. Ocon, he was in the right place at the right time, and he held that position, and it was a fantastic drive, especially against someone like Vettel, who from time to time this year has been absolutely on the top of his game. Not every race, and we'll get to that. But he and Alonso especially, Alonso's defensive drive, you can't not mention it. Although I don't want to put too much emphasis on Hungary, you can't not mention Alonso and Ocon.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
My other two performances, I would say, best of the year would be Charles Leclerc at Silverstone. Once again, right place at the right time. He took advantage of the disaster between Hamilton and Verstappen, and the quote-unquote moral winner of the race, whatever that means. He came second, and it was a fantastic second, especially after the disaster of crashing at Monaco. He really turned that around and delivered a great performance, and it would have been lovely to have seen him win, especially when you consider, well, Ferrari last year. My final one would be Lando Norris at Monaco, not only because he was fantastic, but also because he was so dominating that he lapped Ricciardo. That was the race in which everyone turned around and said that Daniel Ricciardo is looking to 2022 already. And to have done that at Monaco already at that point, the F1 media circus has already damned Ricciardo to next year. That's the level of domination that Norris had at Monaco.
Yeah, it was pretty much a stomping. Can't even put it in any milder word, but when you lap your teammates, it's always, yeah, okay, these two are not on the same level. If not today, if not over the entire season, but on that day, not even same freaking league.
I'm not bleeping you out now, am I?
I guess. Beep.
So to stay on track, let's, no pun intended, let's chat about the races themselves. What would be your best race of the year?
Well, there are two candidates I would consider for that award, but because being indecisive is boring, I am going to go with, well, Baku again. Because while a lot of it came from the red flag at the end, which forced the standing restart, which in turn resulted in the Hamilton break party. Was even before that, while Max had it under control, behind him there was a lot going on. Vettel was slicing through the field. There was always this feeling, okay, when is the next one going to hit the wall, which I feel always adds a bit of spice to proceedings, because one of the problems, in quotation mark, of modern F1 is simply that in some races you just know, okay, if this goes on like normal and nothing will change all that much, and that was simply something I didn't have at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, that feeling of, yeah, we're basically done here. That is something I never had, because there's always the next wall and the next crazy tire blowout, as it was in the end. And thus, I can't say anything else. I just love that race as a total work of art.
And in perfect, boring consensus, I'm actually going to agree with you. Just because of that rule I have about most recent race. I'm not going to say Hungary, just because I feel like we need more time for the rest of the season to look back on it. I think I'm going to turn around in my actual end-of-year review and tell you that Hungary was the best, but Azerbaijan and Baku, I would also say is the best.
Hungary wasn't even the second option I had in mind, because while Hungary was fun, no doubt, the reality is, as a race as a whole, it just wasn't quite there with the two I had mentioned, or I haven't even mentioned the other one, the two I had in mind, because, yeah, the start crash was bloody brilliant from a reject perspective, and of course the Hamilton's fight through the field was amazing. Well, the part of Alonso was, at least. The rest was more, please don't hurt me, Sir Lewis.
Yeah.
And like not even Ocon and Vettel had like, I think there were like 2 times Vettel actually attempted an overtake, which is why I actually don't rate that drive from that ball that highly. And this just, I thought, again, there was a lot of time where the race had just settled down, and just because the names at the front were different doesn't mean the race itself was all that more interesting to me, outside of the whole, oh god, this is news, this is history feeling. So it wasn't even the top 2, that would actually be the Imola race. So, because where there's always fun, and there was a lot of people who, took advantage of that fun, both in the good way and in the rejectful way, so that was actually my number 2. So yeah, I agree with your reason of not having Hungary, so yeah,
I agree with your number 2 as well. I think Imola was probably up there with the best races this year. It also, both Hungary, what you said about Vettel, and the Imola race, both make me think of the same thing we spoke about in our pilot, which is Heikki Kovalainen. And it made me think of how, when I was watching the Hungarian Grand Prix, the thing that made that race so interesting was the fact that when Ocon, who has never won a race before, is in that position of being in first and has a world champion behind him, you have that feeling that he's going to throw it off the road because he's never done it before. There's that pressure on his first ever time. And the countless times we've seen someone like, for example, like Perez, even this year, who has now won a race, he had the opportunity to win at Imola and threw it off the road the moment it got wet. And it's very easy, even for experienced people and even for those who have won races. Take Valtteri Bottas or Felipe Massa for 2 classic examples of good drivers, won many races, but they could never master wet races. So Imola was great just because it really showed up the great drivers from, the people who drive over their own front wings and the people who drive into Williams, who they're fighting for position, and the people who just drive into the gravel trap because they missed the corner.
Yeah.
Not naming any names, but Imola was good fun for that reason.
Yeah, it was. Rain races just always produce the leanest cut, so to speak, the finest meat.
And what would be your worst race of the season?
That is the Portuguese Grand Prix. Like, earlier today, I rewatched the highlight just to make sure, okay, am I suffering from clouded memory? But no. All of that race was just dull. Like, there was a bit of overtaking in the early part because of the safety car, which incidentally was merely caused by Kimi Räikkönen, proving that
naming no names. Oh wait, never mind.
Actually, I'm naming names here. Like Kimi Räikkönen just proving just how cooked he is by that pathetic teammate collision. Title drop.
Yeah, I'll say nice mention of the podcast name there. So.
And into the pit lane. Oh!
Yeah, no, but after that, Hamilton took the lead, and that move admittedly looked cool, but it was against his teammate who did put up a fight, but not that much. Though, of course, we're talking about Bottas, so not that much is already a lot of fight.
So Bottas is not going to be spared.
And then after that, it's just, the race just fizzled out. Like, the strategy was for them to block Hamilton. That didn't work. Hamilton basically just flew by. Like, the only interesting part in the later stages was that Mick Schumacher did beat a Williams, and even that was just taking advantage of Latifi making a driver error. So, yeah. Even the highlights made the race look dull, so we don't even need to go into the actual meat of the race. So Portugal it is. Yeah,
that's a good argument. You're almost convincing me away from my own suggestion. My own suggestion was the Austrian doubleheader, simply because I don't remember anything from either of those races. I think it's twice as damning for me that they had 2 races there and I remember neither of them. I think they had some issues with people driving each other over the track, which was that week's hot topic of storm in a teacup news. But I mean, in terms of the thing about 2021 and the reason why it's been so good, it's the same reason why a season like 2008 was good. It's because every race brought with it something maybe not uniquely interesting, but singularly interesting about that race.
Yeah.
Either it was something which was happening on track or off track, but there was something about that weekend which attracted attention and it attracted interest. And Austria, I don't think, had either of those things. Austria were, I think one of the races was Max Verstappen's first Grand Slam, where he, pole, fastest lap, win, led every lap.
Yeah, that was the second one.
However much I don't particularly like Hamilton winning all the time, Max Verstappen winning with the same kind of domination is not anywhere near more exciting than Hamilton winning. So,
yeah, agreed. Like, of course, I am someone who appreciates stuff like a Grand Chelem by the he just put the hammer down and just dominated the competition. But if you I can fully see why people don't, and even I would say, nice in the historic sense, but again, the most interesting thing about Austria was perhaps what felt like 1 million penalties, 5-second penalties Paris got.
Yeah, that's basically all I can remember. I think just for the sheer blank that I'm drawing, that's maybe a Jeremy thing more than it is an Austrian ring, but for the sheer blank I'm drawing for both of those races is just that's why I'm putting them last.
So from a reject perspective, of course, memorable was in that second Austria race that particularly reject of the race were the attempt by Kimi Räikkönen on the final lap that ended up with him punting out Sebastian Vettel for P9, I think it was P12, P13.
I think it was P13, P14.
Yeah, absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioning these things is reminding me of them, but even doing a little bit of research, I think the anonymity of those races is what has vote for them.
I have my notes here, I have the table, so I noticed, there was the mark for driver classified but didn't finish. Oh yeah, there was that thing, so it's not a Jeremy thing, it's just the Austrian doubleheader is also a very good choice for the worst, so how you look at races, so you don't go wrong with either opinion on that one.
But yeah, I mean, my point would be that in a year where almost every race has been interesting for some reason, the Austrian races lose out because they don't have that interest factor. They don't have the rewatchability factor or that thing that added to the canon of 2021. Yeah. So we're getting close to talking about our rejects of the mid-season. But before we do, let's talk about the last positive things. This would be the most pleasant surprises of the first half of 2021.
All right. Well, I guess I'm going to start again. So for me, it's going to be Fernando Alonso's comeback. Like, when it was announced he was coming back, I was like, oh Jesus Christ, here we go. Like, it was going to be basically just another Kimi, a guy who isn't all that good anymore, hogging a seat just because there's nothing coming from F2 that would be worth more than the PR boost you get from hiring the 2-time champion of the world, Fernando Alonso. But again, Alonso took that opinion and slapped me across the face with it. After it took a bit for him to settle in, he was a bit slower than Ocon in the very early stages, but after that, he's not lost nothing. Of course, in the end, his results aren't that better than compared to his last season, but that's because, his car isn't anywhere better than the McLaren Renault was back then. So, yeah, but I am completely impressed. He's still as good as he was when he left. Would I put him in my top 5 right now? Borderline, but the fact that I'm considering that option for... How old is he? 39? 38?
He is now 40 years old.
Oh, 40 even already. But I consider that for a 40-year-old man. When I compare that with Kimi Räikkönen, when I compare that with Michael Schumacher's comeback, that's saying a lot. So the number one surprise for me is just how good Fernando Alonso has been.
No, that's a fantastic option. I didn't even consider that. Yeah, I agreed. I haven't once said retire old man about Fernando Alonso. Admittedly,
so have I.
Admittedly, I've always been a bit of an Alonso fan ever since 2012 or so. But I will say that I don't have to pretend that he's having a great comeback because he's had a lot of fantastic races, Baku and Hungary being the two most famous ones. But yeah, it's really nice to see him back and not embarrassing himself. I guess we just have such low standards from, as you say, from the bad races of Schumacher's comeback, and the recent never-ending career of Kimi Räikkönen.
One positive thing you have forgotten to mention, which actually I forgot to mention in the earlier category, was Alonso's performance in the hashtag F1 sprint, where he just looked well, and then he took it to the British Grand Prix. Didn't do anything spectacular in the race, but it was basically on the amazing work on Saturday that he got himself another great result on Sunday. So that is something that is worth considering. And I would actually consider, even though it's technically not a race according to the FIA, the F1 sprint is one candidate for worst race of the season, of course, because did anything happen in there outside of Alonso starting well? I don't think so.
No, that's true, actually. Yeah, the sprint was rather boring.
Oh, yeah, Paris is fun.
I saw it with the other users, Nupitz, Giri, and Carlo Space, actually. I was in the pub watching it, and that was the first time I'd watched F1 in the pub since, funnily enough, since Silverstone 2020, when Hamilton drove over the line in first with 3 wheels on his car. But let's talk about the sprint.
The worst sprint of the year.
The worst sprint of the year.
Well, technically also the best one, because we only had one, but the standards for the others are really, really, really low.
So, yeah, I agree with you. It was rather unmemorable, other than the fact that it was the first of its kind. I think it lost its appeal after a few laps, because it very much descended into a very standard kind of processional first stage of the race. And that's, if you're in a normal race, you have the first half an hour, which is everyone's getting into position and the strategy is sort of unfolding. But with the sprint, when you have, in that case, it was 17 laps, you have no strategy. It's merely just a procession from start to finish. And so my criticism of it was that it wasn't unique enough. It didn't have enough which actually differentiated it from just being a very short, or
yeah, I
would say very short, but it was actually too long. That was the problem.
Agreed. That is basically, you basically nailed it. It's going to sound stupid, especially to all those who listen to us who are not a fan of gimmicks in F1 at all, but the way I see it, the problem with the F1 sprint, that it was just not gimmicky enough.
Yeah, it had nothing to differentiate it from just being a very short race with no strategy. It had nothing which got it had the race itself was only interesting because two things. Alonso got up a lot of places, which of course rewarded him with no points at all because he didn't finish in the top 3. And the other one was Sergio Perez spinning out and then retiring the car so that he could work on it over the Saturday evening. Well, not him personally, but the team. And that was it. And none of those things actually had any real, I would say, at least for Fernando Alonso's side, it didn't really have any real impact on the Sunday. And I think that was what everyone was hoping
for.
Yeah, everyone was hoping that the Saturday sprint would really shake up the order, and it kind of just cemented it as it was. And then the Sunday race happened. I take back what I said. Perez, obviously, his retirement meant that he started last, and it ruined his whole of his Sunday. So for him, it made a difference. But there's nothing different, I would say, between that and Perez hitting the wall on the Saturday qualifying as normal.
Indeed, yeah. So it's basically, the first one was a waste of time. Again, I'm not going to say the concept in itself is a waste of time because we haven't seen it at tracks I would consider actually good. Hot take here. I'm not the biggest Silverstone fan on this planet. In fact, I think I'm the least Silverstone fan on the planet, outside of maybe... now I can't think of anyone who had a famous retirement in Silverstone, so yeah, and then look, he goes down the drain.
You know, I've been there twice, right?
Well, I did not know that, but I see why it's popular. It has the soul, it has the passion, but if I look at the track, I look at the races, at a lot of the races, and I play it in the video games, and I just think, no, I do not need this.
That is an opinion, and you are free to share it.
Indeed, that's what this podcast is all about, after all.
Okay, you were talking about Fernando Alonso not sucking. My counter suggestion will be Ferrari not sucking. I'm not like a Ferrari fanboy, but it is nice to see them winning with a positive mindset rather than just being constantly, unendingly rejectful. in the way that they in the way that they handle their intra-team politics, in just the way that they have been cheating and everything. It's famous last words. Assuming they're not cheating right now, it's nice to see Ferrari doing well.
Well, everyone is cheating, so put it this way, we hope that they are not cheating in a way that will get them caught again. No, but I fully agree. I think it really only can be described with the word dignity, as in they finally got their dignity back. Like last season was completely undignified in the way not only Vettel himself was obviously mentally checked out after he was informed he would no longer stay with the team. The team was mentally checked out on him, like points where it seems like they didn't even have a strategy plan for him, where they just went in like a Formula 1 2021 video game quick race mode. It's just better to see them at least have that dignity again. Like this is a proud name. There could be a lot of discussion about how Ferrari is just at a point where we just treat them as something special undeservedly just because they are such a rich history, but in a way that rich history also comes with a certain expectation as far as organizational dignity is concerned, and I think they've regained that this year in a big year. They're currently third in the championship on countback, and so yeah, in a way it sounds rather weird to be happy that Ferrari is third in the championship and that Ferrari is on the upswing when at some point in history, that's the last thing people wanted to hear. But the reality is, it's just good to see, and I'm as happy for them as you are.
It's nice to see Ferrari doing well for the same reason that it's nice to see Alonso doing well. In the same way that it's not nice to see Raikkonen doing so crappily. It's like, because you're just lamenting great talent gone to waste, or in Ferrari's case, lots and lots of money gone to waste. But not that Ferrari did waste talent, but that's another story.
Yeah,
that's another podcast episode. Talent wasted at Ferrari. But okay, my other big positive surprises this year would be Latifi beating George Russell at the Hungarian Grand Prix. And I know that's a silly thing to be happy about, but it's always nice to have people who are under the radar, and when all the media attention since 2019 has been how George Russell is the greatest Saturday qualifier there's ever been, and it's a crime that he's not in the top seat, and it's a crime that he's not getting points, to have Latifi, by benefit of luck, and being in the right place at the right time, getting a 7th place when George Russell got an 8th. It's wonderful to see Latifi do well too, and not just do well, but beat George Russell in a fair fight. So although it is the most petty thing to be happy about, it is nice to see. It's nice to see juniors do well, because it basically means that George Russell, Nicholas Latifi have both had top 8 positions. Latifi almost scoring a point, which Tsunoda got, closer to unrejectification. And to say that about someone who's driving a 2021 Williams, admittedly it's better than the last couple of years Williams, but someone in a Williams to be doing that is really good news. And yeah, like that's all I got to say. Latifi had a really good race, and it's nice to see him do well too.
I fully agree on that, because the one thing is that I mean, this is really what GP Rejects is about, like taking those underdogs, taking those that aren't the big talk about, and then profiling them and seeing their history. And this is going to be, I'm going to assume a bit, and I'm going to assume that Latifi eventually ends up with a profile on our side, and this will be one of the key stories. Like, he was there, he was the block man, he was so good that the hyped up Russell told his team, sacrifice my race to get him further ahead. So yeah, it was just a lovely story. So yeah, fully agree with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, if Russell goes on to win a championship, Latifi can say, I beat him. I beat him in a Williams when it really mattered, you know?
Yeah, the classic, just like the famous fact that Narain Karthikeyan has the edge on Daniel Ricciardo in their one race team battle. So yeah,
one race team battle. Asterisk, citation needed. But yeah, I was thinking
the
more
numbers
like
are out there.
You can't argue with cold hard numbers.
See, Joe, the numbers don't lie, and they spell disaster for you as sacrifice.
Do you have any final positive surprises or positive upsets of the season?
Actually, yes, I do have one more that kind of ties in to what you've said, and that is Williams as a whole. Like, that is another organization. While they're not even remotely as far as Ferrari, as far as reclaiming their dignity is concerned, they at least now aren't the just perpetual backmarkers they appear to be destined to be in the last 2 seasons. And they're eighth in the championship. I'm going to be pretty sure they're going to finish there because I don't trust Alpha or Haas to make up 7 points. So they're a positive surprise, albeit a very subtle one. So yeah, applause for Williams.
Yeah, this year they've had a better car since the last 2 years, and they've just got their first points in 2 years. Yeah, it's another nice team to see doing well. But let's talk about bad things. Let's talk about rejectful things. Let's talk about the worst things this year. Let's do reject of the mid-season. First off, do you have any dishonorable mentions you'd like to get out of the way before we start talking about our real candidates?
Yes, I have 2 of them, and the first one I'm going to do really quick. I'm just going to name them, namely Kimi Räikkönen and Antonio Giovinazzi. I'm going to get into why later, because, well, I might as well spoil it. Alfa Romeo will appear in the top 3 on my reject of the mid-season podium.
Okay.
And so I'm going to go into more details on them later. And the second one is going to be quite controversial because I am going to go with Sergio Perez.
That is an interesting suggestion. Go on, please.
Well, for that, I first would like to remind the audience that reject of the year, and in this case, reject of the mid-season, is partly based on expectations. The reality is the expectation was Sergio Perez would be the good number 2 to Max Verstappen, would be the guy to threaten Mercedes, to get ahead of them, to make the 1-2s happen. In the way Gasly, Albon, and to a lesser extent Kvyat couldn't. And the reality is, I have not seen that happen. To me, Perez is just... I look at Perez results and I ask myself, do I really believe Albon or Gasly couldn't have done that? And the answer, at least as far as Gasly is concerned, is no. The reality is, Perez has done okay, but he hasn't done great. He hasn't fulfilled the expectations people had of him. Put Gasly in that seat and the results would probably be the same. Like, even his win at Baku was basically just Red Bull having the superior car, him driving behind Verstappen for the entire race until Verstappen's tire explodes. Then he almost lost the restart. If Hamilton's brakes hadn't exploded, he would have been ahead of that after turn 1. So yeah, Perez has not impressed me at all this season, and with the expectations he had come in that he would be so better than the Red Bull in-house options, yeah, no, not seeing that, and that is why I'm giving him the dishonorable mention here.
A couple of points I want to raise with that, if just for some debate.
Feel free to.
I'm hearing a lot of ifs in your statement. I will say that it is the mark of a good number 2 to be there when your number 1 is not. I think that although I don't think he ever deserved to win a world championship, I would say that someone like Eddie Irvine in his last 2 years for Ferrari was a very good number 2 because he always was there behind Schumacher, and if Schumacher had an issue, Irvine was almost always there to pick up the points. And Perez has at least been always there to pick up the points basically every race. Obviously the last 2 races that kind of skew those statistics a little bit, and I think a little bit unfairly against Perez, because I feel like he has been far more reliable and dependable than Gasly and Albon were, because Gasly and Albon both had issues of qualifying and being stuck 5 or 6 places down the pack. What you're saying is this year that with a faster car that they would be the same place that Perez is. Maybe so. I can't disagree with that, but yeah. I would at least say that Perez has brought a certain amount of dependability to the second seat, which Gasly and Albon never felt like they fitted what was required of them. And I think that Perez is doing an okay job. I'm not going to tell you that he's doing an amazing job, but I think he's doing okay.
Yeah, but even if you look at it even if you leave out the other Red Bull juniors, the thing is, if you look at his results, he has finished ahead of Bottas when both finished 2 times. Bottas technically finished at Baku, but yeah. So yeah, he's been ahead of Bottas 2 times, and both of them have finished. Admittedly, yes, you have a point that some of it was just bad luck. Some of it was like the ridiculous amount of penalties at Austria. But for example, Great Britain, he wasn't in the point. Bottas was 3rd because he screwed up in the F1 sprint. So yeah, again, I have just not been impressed with Perez. And again, in relation to the expectation F1 fandom as a whole had. That is something that always needs to be remembered with this stuff. We're talking about relative to expectations, and relative to the expectations the F1 fandom had, Perez, in my opinion, just has not delivered.
Okay, I will let you have that one. Although I disagree, I'll let you have that one.
So it should be noted that apparently Red Bull themselves disagree with my assessment. Like Horner came out, was it last week, 2 weeks ago, where he said Perez has been doing a brilliant job. So yeah, they at least officially look at it differently. So
let's see where that goes. My prediction is that Perez will be 3rd by the end of the season, but then again, he could throw it all away. Let's see. If I had a dishonorable mention, I kind of wanted to put them on as my number 3, but something else is much worse. My first dishonorable mention is the rookies season. The rookies of 2021 have all generally not been very good in their own individual ways. I feel like Yuki Tsunoda, who came in with a huge amount of hype, he's the first Japanese driver since Kamui Kobayashi, who himself was, in my opinion, a really good driver. And many Japanese drivers always get that kind of national hype around them that they have. It's kind of sort of the culture of fast, aggressive driving that drivers from Japan kind of get as part of the hype of them coming into Formula One. And Tsunoda has caused more red flags than I think anyone else I know of at all, to be honest, in one season. He's crashed a huge amount in qualifying. Over the radio, he's clearly been very flustered, and he's been very much beaten by Gasly, who this year is kind of having a comeback year. Gasly's kind of repeating the story arc that Danny Kvyat had, and he's doing very well. But Tsunoda really, he needs to spend more time calming down and getting consistent results, because he has a lot of hype, which he hasn't delivered on.
Agreed. Especially, it should be noted that I read today earlier an article that Tsunoda himself agrees with your criticism and says his focus on the second half of the season will be to be more calm, to be more mentally consistent and not get rattled as much. So, yeah, you just nailed the point, as the man himself said it.
Well, there you go. Let's see how that plans out. Mick Schumacher. Mick Schumacher. He is performing probably to expectations, in that Mick Schumacher tends to, every series he's in, spend quite a while getting used to things, and then he has an upturn in form. And he had a very, very, very embarrassing race at Imola, but otherwise I would say hasn't really excelled in the machinery. The Haas is terrible, of course, but I haven't seen him really excelled anyway. And I won't even include Hungaroring, his defense of his position in that case, as being all that noteworthy, to be honest. And Nikita Mazepin, I'm not putting him on my reject podium, because I feel like he hasn't met the hype in the opposite direction. People were going into this season telling us that Nikita Mazepin was going to be the worst driver since Yuji Ide. That was a hot take I heard by someone. And, well, that clearly hasn't happened. The first few races, he was far off his teammates' pace, but he improved. I think around Monaco, since around Monaco, he's still been slower than Mick Schumacher almost consistently, but he's been slower, but that's all he's been. He hasn't embarrassed himself. And when it has come to, for example, the spinning, as is kind of the meme about Mazepin, he hasn't been destroying the car the way that Mick Schumacher has. In the way that Mick Schumacher, as far as I'm aware, has destroyed 2 chassis in practice. And whatever you say about Mazepin, that reflects on Schumacher as well.
Agreed.
I would say that all 3 of them have been very disappointing, and if you asked me to make a really massive prediction, I would say none of their careers are probably going to go anywhere in Formula One.
You're not going to get disagreement from me there.
And they deserve at least a mention. Although it's too harsh to put them on my top 3, I will still put them on my dishonorable mentions.
Good, then we should probably get to the top 3, and whereas you lack the harshness, I have it, because my 3rd place is Mick Schumacher.
Nice.
The reality is, again, this goes back to this Paris point. We are talking about just not the performance in itself, but related to expectation. And the reality is, let's be real here. Mick owes the majority of his career, and especially his jump to F1, to his name. That is a simple fact as far as I'm concerned. And the thing is, he has not shown anything special. He's not, even by the standards of F2 champions, he's been very disappointing. I mean, we're talking about the majority of F2 champions, as much as there are problems with the feeder series, have gone on to good things. Like, we're talking Leclerc, we're talking De Vries, who just recently won the Formula E World Championship. And, yeah, there's nothing special there. He's destroying chassis left and right, that even his team boss basically told the media he needs to stop crashing all the cars all the time. And yeah, even the ones race, I know you're not a big fan of recency bias, and I fully get that, but the reality is Hungary was pretty much what sealed it to me, because this was a race where he could have done something special, where he could have made his point, even if it had not resulted in points. He could have made I am not just the son of Michael Schumacher, I'm not just the nephew of Ralf Schumacher, I am Mick Schumacher. You will remember that name.
Cousin of David Schumacher. I mean, who could forget?
No, but it just hasn't happened. And right now he's not delivering on the hype. He's beating Mazepin, but that was to be expected. And even then, he has been beaten at the British Grand Prix by him.
Also, the problem we have for analysing the Haas duo is that none of them have had opportunities, except at Hungary, and Mazepin never got that opportunity because he was taken out by Kimi Räikkönen in the pits. And everyone blamed Mazepin having not seen the footage, and it's like, well, you hate this guy for reasons off the track, which are fair, but give him his due. He hasn't had the opportunity in any race to actually see what he can do in a crazy situation, which Mick Schumacher did and didn't take advantage of.
Pretty much. And I'm just not seeing it. I would honestly be surprised if we're talking over a career if Mick ends up just as much as a fourth of his uncle, not even his dad, his uncle. Not impressed, not seeing it, and pretty much already making his run at one of the worst F2 champions of all time. He won't be the worst. There's, what's his name, Fabio Lima?
Jolyon Palmer.
Oh, he was a F2 champion too?
I think so, wasn't he not?
I don't know, but it would sound plausible given the series, but yeah, he's not to get away from the main point. Mick Schumacher just suffers right now. As far as I can tell, he suffers a severe case of not it chief. So he ain't it. He doesn't have the it factor, so to speak.
What's your number 2?
The second one is Alfa Romeo. Like, everything about them is just awful. Like, their car is slower than the C39. It somehow looks worse. Its drivers are in a team battle where everyone involved just... Räikkönen looks old because he can't beat Giovinazzi. Giovinazzi looks like he doesn't have a future in F1 because he can't put old Kimi Räikkönen out of his misery. So, yeah, this team is just... Right now it's just a waste of very good money. So, yeah, they are now basically locked into the ninth. I don't see Haas beating them. I don't see them making enough ground to beat Williams. So they're locked into ninth and must be praying for 2022 to come as soon as possible, because this season is a complete waste from A to Z. And I swear, if they extend either of their two drivers for next year, then they will have a very hard time of it not getting reject of the year.
Yeah, I mean, they deserve everything they get if they hire both of those drivers again for next year. They really do. They deserve all the slowness and the lack of points that they get, because it's very uninspiring, and it's also kind of funny how things repeat themselves, and how people were talking about how Hamilton starting the Hungarian Grand Prix on his own was a homage to 2005 US Grand Prix. It's like Williams getting that double points finish that sealed the title in the way that Jordan sealed their position ahead of Minardi. That was Paul Stoddart's biggest problem with that race, was that they could never beat Jordan in the season anymore because of that race. And I think Alfa Romeo have just been beaten in the championship by Williams.
Pretty much, yeah.
What is your reject of the mid-season?
I have to guess we are going to say the same name here, but my name is Daniel Ricciardo. It's as simple as that. We expected some big things from the McLaren lineup, that he would take the team leader position, and then even if we expected such a great season as Norris had, he would then be the greatest teammate fight in the entire grid. But yeah, even after the adaptation period that every driver had, Alonso, Vettel, pretty much everyone who changed seats this season had their issues in the first race simply because there was basically no testing. But pretty much every one of the names I mentioned got their stuff together by Monaco, and that hasn't happened for Ricciardo. He got lapped at Monaco. He has been into the top 5 once since then, and that was pretty much his only good race at the British Grand Prix. But outside of that, he's just midfielder. Like, this is supposed to be the man that beat the 4-time world champion in 2014. That is supposed to be the guy that was the equal teammate to Max Verstappen. I don't know what happened, why he's struggling at McLaren, but Daniel Ricciardo right now just doesn't look like himself at all. So he's my reject of the midseason.
100% agreement. I don't disagree with a thing you said. When Mazepin is showing noticeable signs of improvement as the year goes by, but Ricciardo isn't, that is very, very damning for Daniel. He's been soundly beaten.
Very bad.
And he's probably wishing that it was him in that Alpine this year, in many ways, judging by how they took advantage of that. But he's also had a bit of bad luck, but that's part of it. You get bad luck races, but when you don't have any good luck races, that's usually down to the driver more than it is the circumstances. Everyone has bad luck.
Sometimes
races.
You just have to, indeed, and sometimes you just have to make your own good luck, and he did not do that.
I complete agreement. I would say both of our rejects of the midseason are Daniel Ricciardo. My number 2 and my number 3, I will just quickly go through. My number 3 would be Michael Masi, the head of the stewards nowadays.
Oh.
He has this year been very, very, very bad at organizing the championship drama, which was one of my dishonorable mentions as well, was the drama-rama between Red Bull and Mercedes, which has been another storm in a teacup, as F1 can often have. He's shown that he is relying a lot on very, very stupid and sometimes dangerous gimmicks, as we saw in Baku, that he is kind of bending over backwards for some of the teams when the teams are trying to strong-arm him.
The email saga.
And the sudden publishing of team to FIA radio communication on the world feed has now suddenly shown up Red Bull and Mercedes for basically being like a protection racket, basically telling Michael Masi, "Oh, I sent you an email, you'd better read it." And occasionally he has told them. Occasionally he has told them to get lost, but sometimes it sounds like Michael Masi is just doing whatever the teams tell him to and not actually acting like a race director who should be controlling everything and making sure everyone is safe the way his predecessor did. And for that reason, I'm very worried that a bad accident is going to happen. That's a horrible prediction to make, but I'm very worried about that. And I think Michael Masi deserved a huge amount of criticism this year for the way he's handled things. Because although we've had an exciting season, much of it has been very gimmicky and not entirely all that safe.
Yeah, I fully agree with your observation. That is actually a very good point, and now I feel kind of silly for not having him on my podium as well. But the thing is, it's just not. It's just too much. Like, he doesn't seem to have a consistent approach. He doesn't have a priority, and if he seems to have one, it's not safety, which is really bad. I fully agree with you. There's very good chance there could something really bad happen this year. Like, we got lucky with a bit of the stuff last year, like the tractor at Turkey, and it's just this man. I fear, like, it's easy to talk from the perspective of a fan, but the reality is, as an outsider looking in, he's not good enough for his job. It's as brutal and simple as that to me.
And the sad thing is that who would do a better job? But I suppose that's something I don't know the answer to. And the thing
Neither do I, because we don't have the insight into the organizations. No. We'd have to get someone from the FIA.
And that's the reason why I put him third and not first, because I simply don't know enough about it to make a really critical opinion of it. So he's at least on my podium. If it wasn't for Hungary, I was absolutely determined to put Vettel on my dishonorable mentions. But Hungary, he did turn things around, but I think he deserves some mention this year for just how bad his seasons has been other than those races. He's had 3 races at Monaco, Azerbaijan, and Hungary where he's done really, really well. He's reminded us of his best years. But on the other 8 races, he has been almost consistently been outperformed by Stroll, and in many races has been P nowhere for the entirety of the race, and it's very strange. His up and down season has been very, very weird, and those podiums kind of save him from being nominated for this award. But I'm interested in where the rest of the season is going to go, because I have no idea if Vettel is back or not, because half the time he's the same dejected.
One thing that is noteworthy is that his spirit overall seems to be improved, at least. I actually fully agree that there's a lot of stuff where he just looked like nowhere. The crash in Bahrain was just pathetic, no way to say it. In the Styria, he was nowhere. And to be honest, of course, he's been in Great Britain. That's not unexcusable. And honestly, I wasn't even that big a fan of his second place in Hungary. Like, it was a very good drive, but would I say it was a great drive? Nah, not really, because even as someone who really likes the guy, who's been rooting for him pretty much ever since the early 2010s, the thing is, the only reason he was in that position to begin with was because he had such a horrible start that he didn't get involved in that major mess into turn 1. And after that, well, admittedly, it is the Hungaroring, and there basically were no real opportunities, but I think he only tried it like 2 times, and one was very clever, trying to take advantage of the lapped car, but yeah, he was basically just put in the position and didn't screw it up, assuming the fuel issue isn't his fault. So yeah, it was a very good drive, but not a great one. I wouldn't, if you ask me for a top 10 all-time Vettel, which you're not going to because time, it would probably not appear on that.
I don't know if Vettel's back or not. I hope he is. My final mention, which was my number 2, this is done in a very weird order. My number 2, which is the final mention I will bring on my podium, was the Finns. Both Bottas and Raikkonen, I was giving the joint award for somehow being both absolutely dreadful this year. I think Bottas has had one good race this year, really one actually good race where he stood out, and that was the race where his tire got stuck on for 2 days and didn't come off. And he has really gone back to that 2018 form. And 2018, he was very dreadful. He was never there when he was needed to be there by his teammate and his team to support the team to get a title. We know that Bottas is never going to win a title. He's been washed up since 2018, basically. But he can at least get a win from time to time. He can at least get a pole from time to time.
He actually had a pole at Portugal, so that's one I'd give him a B for, because he had pole, he had the fastest lap, he basically did everything short of beating Verstappen, which just wasn't on the cards.
Okay, I'll take that last point about the pole away then, but I think he has regressed right back to his 2018 form, and every year is another mark on your CV for next year. And with all the hype about Russell, which is endless hype about Russell, about whether Russell's going to...
machine goes on and on.
Well, whether he's going to drive in the Mercedes next year. Bottas drove into Russell in Imola, who depends on whose fault that is. I don't know whose fault it was. I need to re-watch it. But then you also have the disaster at Hungary. He is really, really, really trying not to drive for Mercedes next year.
And of course the Baku mess, we cannot ignore that.
Oh, of course,
basically nowhere on pace, legit. So, phew.
Yeah. So Bottas is my number 2, along with Kimi Räikkönen in a joint finish award.
Yeah, I get that, and honestly, I do not necessarily disagree with you. The reason I had Paris as a dishonorable mention and not Bottas is simply because, well, Bottas, in my opinion, at least was there in Austria. He was there in Bahrain, so he did his number 2 job, I think, a little better than Paris, but honestly, you could have just exchanged Paris and Bottas, in my opinion, as far as this honorable mention go. He's not having a great season by any means. He's basically having a Barrichello 2001, and unlike Barrichello in 2001, he doesn't have the luxury that his teammate doesn't need him. So, yeah, it's just not there for him. And honestly, in a way, it will feel like taking old Yeller behind the barn if Russell gets that seat. Hype.
Yeah, hype.
Hype. We're so hype.
I'm so excited.
Anyway, yeah, but... And of course, Kimi, yeah, retire, old man. That's all I'm going to say to that. It's just ridiculous at this point. Absolutely ridiculous. And even more ridiculous are the fans who still want him around. If you're listening to this and you are one of those fans, I do not like you. As far as that is concerned.
You can't use your platform to start shouting at Kimi fans, Lennart. It's against the ethics of podcasting. You can't just...
Editor said it.
You can't just abuse Kimi Räikkönen fans because you don't like Kimi.
Come on, how can you not see he's more cooked than goulash? How?
And on that note, let's wrap this up. This has been the GP Rejects podcast, Teammate Collision. We have gone overtime again, but not as much as our pilot, so let's hope we can cut this down to a reasonable length for our lovely listeners at home. And we hope you've enjoyed listening. If you have any feedback, this is going to be posted up online on Spotify. We're going to post this up on the GP Rejects forum. Please comment, let us know what you think of our opinions, because our opinions are almost certainly wrong and terrible. So yeah, let us know what you think, and we'll see you on the next podcast, I suppose. I don't know when that will be or where that will be, because I will be in a different country, and who knows what we're going to chat about. But
Indeed.
let's see for the future. Take care, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Any closing words, Lennart?
Yes. Always remember, where teammates are close, teammates collide.
Rubens back, and all sorts of problems there. A Red Bull, the two Toro Rossos there. That looks like that Buemi. There's a real problem there.